All right, we're back. We're live at Defcon. Actually, we're not, but I'm sticking with that line. What's going on, man? So you're Allan Stevo, correct? You're of Kraken. I believe you're chief of staff at Kraken, but you were here today as Allan Stevo, not necessarily as a representative of Kraken, and you gave a talk today. Unfortunately, I missed it because I was making espressos all day. I don't know how I got into the espresso making business, but somehow I did. What's the quick and dirty of what the thesis of what your talk was today, and then we'll get into it. I'm sure I'll have a lot of questions.
That sounds good to me. I was once chief of staff at Kraken. Now I get to do another fun job, different kind of fun job,
Oh, okay.
but also very fun. And I do get to work at this very cool exchange that has Monero.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about Kraken too.
we'll talk
I
about
have Kraken
Kraken.
questions.
Okay,
as well.
okay. Ooh, we'll see. I'm here as me. Okay, so the talk was like a friend and I were just kind of brainstorming a little bit about use cases for crypto, and Monero fit the bill of what we were discussing, and as we put our minds together, it was that the internet's kind of treated in a wholesale environment, even though we're retail users. In the way you use internet at home, the way I use internet at home, probably it's a little bit more wholesale than retail, where your natural gas company will sell you units, but your internet company will sell you a monthly plan that's relatively uncapped, and you have neighbors right next to each other using the internet, using these uncapped plans. And what if those neighbors had a method of communicating and saying, hey, I'm going to resell you some of my internet? That'd be kind of cool if there's a software to do that. Or what if someone with a coffee shop in, like, instead of New York City, maybe it's rural New York or something, someone with a coffee shop where the mayor has been promising for ages, oh, we're going to get Wi-Fi in the town square. The person who runs the coffee shop says, hey, I'm going to start selling subscriptions to my Wi-Fi, right? This idea of reselling. Or what if someone in maybe a more rural Moroccan village came up with a way to kind of resell the internet locally? How might this profit motive help drive the adoption of mesh networks? Instead of mesh networks just being altruistic, how might giving somebody a few cents for the gigabytes you use help to change that attitude and help that to grow? So kind of the talk was that, comparing maybe couch surfing to Airbnb, maybe a mesh network to the idea we had.
Okay, that was the Airbnb analogy. I got you. So basically trying to fuel or fund or incentivize a mesh network through the payment of micropayments using Monero.
Yeah.
Why Monero?
Privacy. This is the cache of the electronic cache we have right now, right? The best we have.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me. We say it on this show every day. Are you? Let's get into that a little bit, and then we'll go back to the mesh network thing. How did you get into crypto? I'm assuming you started as a Bitcoin guy, and are you still a Bitcoin guy? Are you a Monero guy, or do you rather not be any type of guy?
If I had to, if
Are
yeah.
you coin agnostic? What's your?
No, there's a lot of shitcoin out there. I'm not agnostic.
Okay.
There's a lot of shitcoin. There's I got into it in 2013. A friend of mine wouldn't shut up about Bitcoin, and another friend of mine was like, right. Few friends and I, we opened up a Bitcoin exchange in New York City. It was right next to New York Stock Exchange. You could walk in with cash, walk out with Bitcoin. There were 1,000 people through there some days, and it was this super vibrant crypto oasis in New York, and it was really amazing. And we were on a bunch of documentaries, and like,
Which exchange was that? I used to. What was the name of the exchange that you guys started in New York?
it's called the New York Bitcoin Center.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And BitLicense came around, and
I didn't know you're the guy that started that. That's super cool.
I'm not the guy.
Oh, you're one of the guys.
There's
Okay.
a much more important the guy, and I'm one of the guys who helped assist in the process. I helped assist in the process, and I watched this really cool, vibrant environment in New York go from like all this development happening, so exciting, to like almost a desert, and to the point that like
Well, that was the bit license, right?
With the bit license, yeah. The people in New York have become second-class citizens in a way where, right, there's all these hundreds, perhaps thousands of companies avoid New York citizens the same way the residents, I should say, the same way that they would avoid citizens of Iran, citizens of North Korea, and then you have residents of New York. And is that how it should work? That the people in one of the most prosperous places in the world are somehow second-class citizens with less rights? It's insane.
Well, yeah, because it's controlled by the big banks, right, which kind of make the rules in New York.
I just know that a regulatory body put that in place. I don't know who's behind it. I don't know. Some regulatory body put it in place.
So Bitcoin. So what is your? Do you think crypto is all about like being digital cash, or are you a believer and that's like what the purpose is? Like that's the killer app is money?
That's a great question, and I don't have a good answer on it. To me, the excitement, an important excitement for me around Bitcoin. It's like you had a time. There was a time where my grandparents and your grandparents had the same kind of telephone, and everyone's grandparents in the U.S. had the same kind of telephone, and right, it might be black or red, or maybe you could have it on the wall or the desk, right? But there was this monopoly control of how the telephone system worked that was granted by the government, and you end up with the monopoly comes to an end in the early 80s. Within 27 years, you go from this stagnated technological environment to this very vibrant technological environment where entrepreneurs were fighting with each other for consumers, and within 27 years, you go from rotary telephone, clunky rotary telephone that you could seriously damage someone with, to everyone's got a supercomputer in their pocket. Not everyone. You can buy a supercomputer, a commercially viable supercomputer with the release of the iPhone in 2007. And this is amazing. So, like, opposing it were government economists and Harvard PhDs who would go on the radio and go on TV and say, "Oh, natural monopoly theory. The only possible way to do any utility is with a monopoly. If you do it any other way, you're trying to damage the marketplace and ruin people's lives." And these same, not the exact same people, but people with those Harvard PhDs and those government economists say today very similar things, where they say there's only one way to do a national currency. There's only one way to do currencies. It's got to be the national monopoly. And if you do any differently, you're gonna ruin nations, and you're gonna ruin the marketplace, and it's gonna be mayhem. Right? They're saying this exact same stuff. Instead, we've started this process of getting to the supercomputer in your pocket of currency. I have no idea what that looks like. I don't know what it looks like. All I know is that for the first time, we're starting to get this competition where none existed before, and it's going to be really beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the marketplace is going to do with it. I don't know what consumers are going to do with it. I don't know what entrepreneurs are going to come up with, but it's going to be really, really cool. I know that. And we might not even recognize the world 40 years from now because of it.
Very cool. So you're basically saying money should be an open, competitive thing. It shouldn't be a monopoly that governments have. Anybody should kind of be able to kind of pitch and generate their own form of money, and if the world adopts it, the world adopts it.
Yeah, our default state is freedom, I would say, and unless you have a really good argument for why government should take my freedom away from me or your freedom from you, I see no reason those things should happen. Yeah, I'd agree with totally what you just said.
So now about Bitcoin. Bitcoin versus Monero. Do you like to talk about it in those terms, or you don't really like?
We can talk
do
about
you see? Terms. What's your take when you measure up the two? Are you pro Bitcoin and pro Monero, or are you just a Monero guy? I'm trying to get to the bottom of that.
That's good. I like how you said it, pro Bitcoin and pro Monero. I'd say I'm rooting for both those teams. I think Monero. So there's an issue I have with Monero that makes it inferior to Bitcoin. That's notable for me. But Monero does privacy. I really respect the how much emphasis is put into privacy around Monero.
What do you see as being that fault in Monero versus Bitcoin?
The monetary idea with Bitcoin being capped is a really neat experiment that I think is going to prove to just be fantastic. I think it's really going to work out so nicely, and it contradicts generations of Keynesian economists that say that this is not possible or desirable. I think we're going to see like this really neat experiment taking place that's going to be successful. Now Monero, figuring out because of the privacy, figuring out how much Monero is really in circulation, if there were ever some type of compromise of the code, would be difficult to do because there's not a ledger that I can.
The whole perfectly binding being, perfectly binding versus perfectly blinding is kind of what we in the Monero community. That's the argument that we that's usually how we describe it. So Bitcoin is perfectly binding. So it's 100% very clearly audible. So much so that you could see every transaction on the blockchain. Monero is perfectly blinding, and with that you're potentially sacrificing some of that audibility.
Yes, that is. Thank you for the shorthand. Okay. Thank you so much.
I mean, we certainly have arguments against that in the Monero community as to why, but I think that's kind of something that I hear from a lot of Bitcoin maximalists as to being why they may like Bitcoin versus Monero. And now, in terms of the cap thing, do you have any opinion on?
Are you going to educate me after this on why I'm wrong about that? It would make me happy if you did.
Yeah, we could talk about that. Well, we did a whole show on it. I guess
or
basically
you send me the link and I learned.
Yeah, I'll send you the link. I guess basically the argument is that Monero itself is auditable, and then that this concern of where basically coins could kind of secretly be created is only in the scenario where you have quantum computers. Is what based on my research, that's basically where that concern comes in, right? So when you have quantum computers, you may be able to kind of secretly, essentially generate Monero, right? But then the issue is, well, if that's the case, then Bitcoin is also broken, right? Because then you could very easily turn any, public key into a private key. So that's kind of like the major argument against it. Yeah. That's,
okay.
Yeah. Well, what's your response to that?
Maybe it would not be just around quantum computing. If there were,
because other than that, it's just math, right? So as long as you trust the math and you've audited the math, now you yourself are like I'm not capable of doing that. But if you trust the people that have audited the math and trust that it's been looked at, and it's a large honeypot, just like Bitcoin, right? So there's that argument. So it's really it's a trust in math, which I think Bitcoin also has, but a little less so because of its transparent ledger. Monero is obfuscated, so there's a little more trust required there because you're basically entrusting that the math that encrypts the amounts is correct. So it comes down to trust in the math.
So I don't want to trust the people who tell me the math is good. I want to trust the math myself, and I think I need to dig into the statement I made to you a little bit more, and I think you give me a little good direction here. I'm going to want to watch the link to your video too and learn.
We did a great show on it. So I guess let's jump back to the mesh network thing for a second.
I'm ready.
So is this a project that you're actively working on that you're trying to? Okay.
We came here to present it just to kind of see how it felt presenting the idea a little, to get a little bit of feedback, and I'd say it's been a good day, and now I think we'll just kind of feel out what comes next. Is this something that we want to make a top priority? A friend and I were coming up with the ideas. He said something. I came back a week later with like a 20-page white paper and said, hey, this is how I think we can make it all happen. And some of that got presented today. And we'll see. We're thinking it over still.
Okay. Very cool. Is there a place where people can kind of follow the project or learn more about it?
I don't have a good... No. There is
not yet. All right. We're in the early stages.
In my hands.
This is it. This is where they can learn about it.
Right here.
Anyway, let's go back to Bitcoin one second, because one of the things you said was the fact that Bitcoin's capped is one of the things that makes it interesting, and it certainly does. But do you think that might potentially cause a flaw with Bitcoin security, because you don't have the incentive to mine isn't always there, right? because at some point there's going to be no Bitcoin left to mine. That's kind of the argument that's made in Monero land for why the tail emission exists, so that the blockchain will always be secured by miners. They'll always have the incentive to mine. Is that something that you have an opinion on?
Yeah, this is a thing when people would debate those government PhDs on why there shouldn't be government enforced monopoly under threat of jail time, right? When there'd be these debates, the free market person just kind of had to point to the idea of having a little faith in the idea that a consumer and a entrepreneur will interact with each other in their own self-interest and often to the benefit of many other people. I don't have a good answer for what you've said. I believe that there's a lot of self-interest built into Bitcoin, and it's in a good way. One example you pointed out was with the mining rewards. If we do not come up with a solution for it, then it's not meant to be, and something else will come along. That doesn't negate the fact that a very important individual or group of individuals put together this technology and released it out in the world, and it can't be put back in that box, and this is going to change the world. And whether that name be, Bitcoin or something else, or the technology be slightly different, I don't know. I know what the amazing silverback gorilla in the room is right now, that is dominating, and deservedly so. I know that, and I also know that in 1994, when was the last time you did an Alta Vista search? Not any time recently, probably. You may have done a few searches of DuckDuckGo or Google today, but in 1994, Alta Vista was number one in the world, and things change. Things change.
Right, so you're saying we're at the very early stages,
Yes.
so to make predictions about the winners at this point in time is naive, to say the least.
And I furthermore, a reason I don't believe in central planning, a reason why, not just me, but a reason why central planning fails is because it's hard for a small committee of people to know what a marketplace full of people can intuit and figure out through interaction with each other. I don't know what the future holds with Bitcoin. I know that a general principle is problems arise in the world, and if the marketplace is allowed to just be to its own without the government putting its boot on the necks of participants in the marketplace solves those problems as they arise. If they're important enough problems. If Bitcoin becomes important, more important than it is today, 5 years ago you and I would not have imagined being here today having this discussion. I don't think. Maybe you did. I did not. If Bitcoin becomes big enough and that problem becomes in need enough of a solution, then people will feel incentivized to figure out how to continue the robustness of Bitcoin.
Do you think Bitcoin's lack of privacy is a flaw in Bitcoin? The fact that it lacks fungibility? Do you think that is an issue that Bitcoin needs to solve, or you think it could just exist as is, and then something like Monero will just fill that niche?
I think it's good. It's good the way it is, and it's good that Monero is able to fill that niche. And Monero absolutely beats Bitcoin in this way. I know there's ways to, develop some, not develop, but there's methods of anonymizing transactions in Bitcoin, and there's going to be people who are going to make a pretty penny figuring out how to de-anonymize those transactions one day. Monero feels like a little bit more comfortable of a risk to take when you want privacy.
So you work for Kraken.
I do work for Kraken.
I would say that's probably the largest on-ramp from fiat to Monero, right? Is that true? Is that like a true statistic?
I don't know the stats, but
it seems like the largest exchange that actually accept where you could go and actually buy Monero directly with fiat.
I don't know the stats. I bet that's true.
Okay. So is there within the Kraken corporation, is there love for Monero there? It seems like it obviously seems to get a little respect. We don't see Monero in other exchanges like Coinbase, for example, which I'm not exactly sure why that hasn't happened. the rumors has always been, well, because it's anonymous and private, they don't want to touch it. But Kraken certainly hasn't seen an issue with that. Do you have any opinions on that as to why like a Kraken is embracing Monero, but some of these other large exchanges aren't?
I think there are a lot of people who are far better than me at commenting on that, and who are far more knowledgeable than me. And I think that's a good question for them. And I think there's a lot of people in the world who see a lot of justice in there being financial freedom again in the world, or there being a way to use cash, online. This is a beautiful thing, and I don't know. There's so many decision makers and so many discussions that happen for anything to be listed on exchange.
Mm-hmm.
It takes so much effort, and I wouldn't even begin to be able to comment on such a complicated matter.
Okay. Anything else you want to talk about today? You have any other Monero things to talk about?
I'm having such a wonderful time here at DEF CON, and Monero Village has been really fantastic. I'm just having a fantastic time. No other comments than that.
Did you try an espresso? Did you get an espresso yet?
I have not. What's that espresso? Oh, wow, that's a serious espresso machine.
Yeah, so that's coffee's from Brazil. We had it shipped here, and we're testing out a concept where you could buy the coffee, and then you can tip the farmers directly with Monero.
When will they receive the Monero? How's it work?
They're getting sent the Monero. So some people
Their wallet is right.
Yeah,
the
so
address is right here.
I provided the owner of the farm with a Monero wallet, actually Cake Wallet on iOS, and she's being sent the tips. And then the larger idea is to actually put the private keys in the hands of the farmers themselves. Some of them may not have access to a phone or something where they could have the app, but the idea is all they really need at the end of the day is that private key, and then to have tips being sent directly to the farmers. That's the concept we're trying to test.
Has she texted you back yet saying, hey, this is kind of cool that this...
Oh, yeah, they're super excited about it. Yeah.
They're being sent the money from Las Vegas, and they're like, oh, this is really... Yeah, that's great.
So that's kind of the large idea, and then the idea is that it could be applied to a lot of things, not just coffee. Anywhere where you have kind of like third world producers, kind of giving people in the first world that consume the things the ability to tip the producers directly, peer-to-peer, with Monero, digital cash.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. All right, well, thanks for coming on. I hope we can learn more about the Mesh Network project. I guess do you have a Twitter or something we can follow you on? Or?
It's the Mesh Network we're going to figure out. Okay. That takes more time. I'm at Allan Stevo on Twitter. I don't tweet too much these days. I'm head down working hard these days. I'll appear back on your show one day.
Yeah, if you could let the higher ups at Kraken know, we really love Kraken here at Monero Talk, like I said, because it is one of the larger exchanges that where you could buy Monero directly with fiat. So thanks for that to Kraken. We appreciate that.
Tweet them all. I'll give you the handles.
Will do. All right, Matt. Thanks.
Thanks, Doug.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
Yep.